Gotcha. We're waiting on Hal and Wayne, Representative Clark. Wayne said that he was going to be late, so Howard should be coming in soon in a few minutes. So it is now 6:04, and Senator Jones has joined. And we have Senator Clark here as well. And I do believe Representative Prince is in the audience. And if he would send me a message, then I will move him over as well. I don't want to move the wrong Brian Prince, so I just wanted to make sure. Good afternoon, and on behalf of the Board of Directors of the CSRA Business League, Ms. Veronica Sharif, the board chair, and the staff, I would like to welcome you to our Augusta legislative update session, which we normally have at the beginning of the legislative term and at the end of the legislative term to try to give you an update on what occurs in Atlanta. We all know that this year has been a year where redistricting has taken place, and we've had some things that occurred after the commission voted on redistricting, as well as some gun laws that are new to us here in the state of Georgia, and tax cuts and tax breaks. So our goal here at the CSRA Business League is to ensure that, number one, you get the truth and not the spin that the news may have or what you may get out in the street. So we ask that you are mindful of the fact that the legislators have given up their time, and please ensure that you ask questions. If you put them in the chat or if you put them in the question and answer, I will make sure that they are answered for you. I also ask that you please like our Facebook page on social media on Facebook. Please visit our website at business-league.org and subscribe to our YouTube channel on YouTube as well under CSRA Business League TV. So we're here to serve, even though we're in the midst of still in the midst of a pandemic that is playing hide and seek with our lives. We are still here at the CSRA Business League. We are still here to serve, and we are still here to be of service. So without further ado, I do not want to take away the time of the legislators. I know Senator Jones has sent us a presentation, so I will put that on the screen first. And I'm not sure which one of them will go first, whether it be him or Representative Clark, but whichever one wants to go first, they can.
Ken, Ellis, am I going to be able to use this screen, or are you going to do the next slide?
If you want me to I can share. I can give it to you to share, or if you like, I can share it for you, whichever one you want.
That's fine. Yes, I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see it?
No.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. So this is legislative update. This is just a few bills that I kind of just went through, and what I did was take the bad and also the good, some good bills, some bad bills, and I did a couple of things that I had worked on for local legislation or just legislation in general. So I just want to say that this is a very interesting year as far as legislation was concerned. We had a lot of different things that had to go through. There were some good things, even though most of the things that you've seen have been kind of negative, but there actually were some good things, and I wanted to point those out too. Ellis, next slide. So we have good, bad, and then some local pieces of legislation. Next slide. Okay, Ellis, you check your phone. I put a number on there. No, not the next slide. Just check your phone. I put a number on there. See if that person can come in. So one of the good pieces of legislation that we have is what's called SB 10, which deals with driver's license and suspension of court dates. So this is the situation. When a person misses their court date currently, and we're just talking about traffic cases, a bench warrant is issued. We don't really, we basically corrected the fact of basically arresting the person on a bench warrant, even though we still call it a bench warrant. That got corrected a couple of years ago, depending on the charge, like a DUI now, you still would get arrested. But drivers like, but what we did do is we suspended your license. So you miss court, your license gets suspended. What would have to happen is the whole court case would have to conclude before you could get your license back. So SB 10, what the legislature did was they said that now the court, with of course the consent of the prosecution, but basically the court can order a reinstatement to driver services and then also waive that $50 fee. So before this law went into effect, what would have to happen is that your case would have to be completely concluded. Well, think about it. Even with the pandemic, that case may take a year or two. Even before the pandemic, that case may have taken 6 months. So you're gonna have a license for 6 months. And yet it may have just been a simple speeding ticket that a person has missed court on, but they've lost their license for 6 months waiting for their case to conclude. Or maybe, they may want to have a jury trial. And so it may even take longer than that. So what this does is, this is a very good law. What this does is it allows the court to go ahead and order reinstatement. And also the fee can be waived. So now a person that misses court can basically go get their license back. Now it's discretionary, it's not automatic. So in other words, we don't want persons just purposely missing court. So you have to give your rationale why you missed it. But it does actually allow persons who miss court. They might have somebody who's in the hospital, whatever it may be, they can miss court. And then the court can say, okay, I look at your excuse. I look at the reason why you didn't make court. I'll go ahead and tell driver services to go ahead and give your license back. So that is something that's going to help people in the real world without a doubt. Next slide. So SB 338, this is a bill which is going to extend Medicaid coverage for postpartum care from 6 months to 1 year following in the pregnancy. So it's a very simple bill, as we like to say sometimes. It's only 2 pages, but it's also a very important bill. So it allows persons now that receive Medicaid coverage currently, and I'm going to look at another bill where we actually talk about expanding Medicaid coverage through a waiver. So these persons already are getting Medicaid coverage. So they get it for the 6 months after the pregnancy. So now we've expanded up to actually 1 year following the end of the pregnancy. So this is actually one of those kind of bills that really does have a real world effect. It's going to impact, many women, of course, and it's going to help them after they have their children, have their child. Next slide. SB 403, Co-Responder Act. So one of the things we realize is a lot of times when the officer goes to a scene, what happens is he may be dealing with somebody who actually has a mental issue, maybe dealing with somebody who actually has issues concerning, more mental issues than criminal issues. And how do you deal with that person? Right now, of course, the way we deal with that person, even if they're suffering from mental health issues, they actually the only thing the officer knows how to do really is just take them to jail. You can do what's called an involuntary commitment, but that's not necessarily something that you want to do. What this bill does is allow us to have co-responders. It allows your sheriff's department, et cetera, to have what we call co-responders. It's not mandatory that a county do this, but it allows them to do it. And the key is going to be, when I go to the next page, not yet, but the key will be how this is going to actually, why a sheriff's office will be inclined to do it. So you put peace officers, police, and behavioral specialists together. So they can actually ride together. You probably have seen this possibly on television, things of that nature. So you have an officer and you have a counselor that's going to be riding together, or they can be going to the same call if they know that this is more of a mental health kind of concern than necessarily a criminal concern. And so what happens is your local sheriff's office, if they want, they're going to contract with your behavioral health professionals. And they have options of who they contract with. That's going to be up to the sheriff how he works that out. We're not mandating how that actually takes place. But what it allows them to do is contract with your behavioral health specialists and say, okay, you guys are now under contract with us to be one of our co-responders. You'll be one of the persons that are going to be out there to help us when the situation arises that we think is more of a mental health concern than a criminal concern. It may be both, quite frankly. But right now, what we're saying at that moment in time is more of a mental health issue. We got to get that. We got to look at that first, even before we get to criminal. So they can then contact one of these co-responders, a certified counselor. Make sure make note of that. Counselor is going to be certified. and they can contact that person, and maybe we can actually get that person on the right track instead of just going to jail, and then they kind of just sit in jail and possibly get lost into the system, quite frankly, because there was never any buffers there to kind of say, hey, this is a mental health issue along possibly with a criminal issue, but it's both, or it's more of just a mental health issue. You just take them to jail, they bond out, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Now we're starting at the beginning of the process and saying, hey, this might be a mental health situation. And from that standpoint, that's where it goes from. Next slide. So you designate one or more officers to participate as team members, because this will be a team. So they'll be working together. So it's not as though it'll just be persons off the street. As we said, the sheriff will contract with these behavioral specialists. Crisis intervention training is offered by post. That's the police officer academy, so to speak. So they're going to be offering training classes for the co-responder and also for the officer as far as this crisis intervention is concerned. All training is paid for by the Department of Public Safety. So it's not going to come out of the county coffers. If they want to do extra training, they certainly can do that. And immunity is the key. So the reason why this is now kind of open is one of the questions would be, well, you got this co-responder, would they be responsible? As you know, police officers have immunity when they go to a scene. There's ways of getting around that, but basically they're cloaked with immunity. And so immunity was the key to getting this law particularly passed. So yes, now you have a co-responder. So now they'll also be immune from lawsuits and things of that nature. And that was really the key. One of the keys, number one, first key was we had to recognize that this was an issue. That's first and foremost. But then second is, well, now you have this other person that's coming to the scene. How does that fit within the immunity kind of situation? And so we provided immunity for them too, as far as dealing with the co-responder situation. And that was really the key. That's really the key prospect of getting this passed and actually going forward. Because without that, you could see a behavioral specialist saying, well, I don't feel comfortable going out there, because if I go out there and not anything, and we recommend this sort of treatment or whatever it may be, and it doesn't work, then I can be sued personally. And naturally a person would, be very hesitant to participate in that kind of program, because they could lose everything, but yet they're doing the state work and they're not necessarily state employees. So immunity was the key to getting this law passed. Recognizing, number one, that mental health is a serious issue. That's first and foremost. But then also, you can see your behavioral specialist saying, I don't know if I want to go out there if I can be sued personally and lose my house and everything else if something goes wrong. So we gave them the same immunity that officers also have. Next slide. SB 610. And this is another thing dealing with Medicaid expansion. And this one here is going to be a waiver, though. And I don't know if this one would necessarily go through. We have to ask the U.S. Department of Health. So the previous one, which I think was 338, the previous one, those persons are already on Medicaid. So we're just expanding what they're already on and saying it can go up to a year. This one here is a little bit different. So it's a good bill, but it is a little bit different. It deals with mental health. In this situation, as you know, we have not done Medicaid expansion. So what the federal government has allowed not only the state of Georgia to do, but other states to do, but there's a caveat to that I'll get to, is allow you to do waivers. And so, okay, you haven't done full expansion, but you can do these waivers and kind of put different areas and get expansion of Medicaid. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be requesting to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to allow private institutions to have a reimbursement for mental health and substance disorder. That may go through. You have to ask the government for this waiver because we have not expanded it. So you ask the government for this particular waiver. The problem is, the reason why I say we don't know if it will go through or not is because Georgia hasn't expanded it, the administration, and this even started under the Trump administration, but Biden also, the administration is kind of hesitant to grant these waivers where your state has not expanded Medicaid expansion, because it's kind of like trying to get around the system. So you don't want to expand it, but you keep taking little pieces here and there of this great bill, which is Medicaid expansion. So Georgia, what we've done, and this isn't the first time we've asked for a waiver, what we do is we don't expand it, but then we'll go to the federal government and say, can you give us a waiver to do this? Or you can give us a waiver to do that. We keep taking little pieces instead of doing the whole expansion. So this is part of that again. So it's a good idea, but you do have to ask the government, the U.S. government, and this is Department of Health and Human Services, to grant the waiver. They may take the position you guys just need to expand Medicaid expansion, then we'd gladly give you the waiver. But you guys just keep coming back and saying, well, we don't want to do the whole thing, but we want to do this little piece here. We want to do the whole thing, but we want to do this. So now, once again, we're not expanding, but now we want a waiver to do mental health and substance abuse disorder. So I'm not sure if that would go through or not. So it's a good plan. It's something we should do, but look where we're losing by not expanding Medicaid expansion. And of course, we know that that's one of the big issues that Stacey Abrams has been presenting. And this is one of the reasons why, because the government doesn't have to grant these waivers. Maybe a great idea, but what they're saying is we don't not necessarily inclined to do that when you guys won't go the full route. And if you go the full route, then we'll do some of these other little things that you want us to do, but you refuse to go the full route, and we're not really inclined to grant these waivers under those circumstances. Next slide. So those are some of the better pieces of legislation. I know my colleagues probably have some other things too, trying to look at some global pieces of legislation that were out there. And of course, we also have time for, we'll have time for questions, but I think Representative Howard and Representative Nelson are on, and they can also talk about some of the good pieces that they saw. Of course, the big, gigantic mental health bill that we had was also big. I thought within that, dealing with the mental health issue as far as the co-responders, what I kind of touched on. So bad would be HB 1084. I start off with that because it's actually very timely. Can't teach divisive concepts, which if you go to number 3 here, you'll see this is divisive concept. So let's just put it into today's, what's happening in the news right now. An individual by virtue of his race is inherently or consciously racist or oppressive toward individuals other races. What HB 1084 says is you cannot teach divisive concepts. So could you say that the shooter in Buffalo believed based on his race that he was oppressive towards individuals of other races? According to HB 1084, which is now law, you cannot say that. So you can teach about what he did, and you can say this guy went and killed African Americans. But what you wouldn't be able to say is he did that because the way he viewed his race, he wanted to oppress other people. There's no doubt that's exactly what he was doing. The way he viewed his race. It's not about, oh, he was born white, so therefore he thinks he's better than anybody. No, the way he views whiteness right now, his view of it makes him want to oppress, not only oppress, but kill people. There's no debate about that. Right now in the Georgia law, you cannot say that. That's the new law that's gone into effect. You cannot say, a teacher is not going to be able to say, this shooter basically believed he was better or he was racist or that he was oppressive towards other individuals. You can't do it. And if you can, then there's no point to the law. So I'm sure some Republicans say, oh, no, you can do that. No, you can't, because if you could, then the law has no teeth to it. No, you actually meant what you said. This guy totally believes that wants to oppress people of another race. There's no doubt. Look at the markings on his gun, look at the manifesto. There's no doubt. This says an individual. This doesn't talk about history. See, we kind of got caught up in this a little bit about, oh, we're talking about history. This isn't history. This is an individual, not an individual 200 years ago. An individual today, if you say that because of his race, he believes he should be able to oppress other people, you're in violation of this law. So you can certainly teach and say, hey, this guy shot African Americans and a couple other whites. You can say that, but you then couldn't take the extra step and say he did this because he's a racist. But that's why he did it. But you can't say that anymore in Georgia. That's out. And no one can tell you that they can. It's just not true. If they try to tell you that they can, they're lying. This is exactly what the bill says, and you cannot say it. Next slide. And so these are some of the other things that you can't say. An individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely because of his or her race, which of course you don't want to say that. An individual moral character is inherently determined by his or her race. But here's the thing about that is, and this is one of the examples I've used on this one. So when we talk about individual moral character is inherently determined by his or her race. So number one, we could be talking about this guy, but one of the examples I always use was the Hamburg massacre out in Aiken that took place in the 1870 or something of that nature. The Hamburg massacre was where you had Ben Tillman, who was a white racist, who basically killed soldiers, black soldiers. He basically killed black soldiers intentionally, murdered them. There was a state senator who came down, who was African-American, who came to investigate this. So he murders these black soldiers. These are black soldiers. They aren't slaves. Not that it would matter, but I'm just putting it in context. Remember, Republicans and others, they love soldiers, right? So these are soldiers. This guy kills soldiers. That's what he does. A state senator who happens to be African-American, he comes down to investigate. So he comes down and see what happens. They meet him when he comes off the train. Ben Tillman meets him when he comes off the train, murders him. In fact, the African-American senator tells the people who murder him, will you tell my wife how to take care of my things, how she can do what she can do to take care of the household. All this is documented, it's all history. Ben Tillman would later become governor of South Carolina. You don't think that he did that because he was white, his moral character was based on his whiteness. Do you really believe that? You think he just did that? Why? Because he just didn't like the soldiers, he didn't like the uniforms. I mean, what kind of foolishness are we talking about here? So you could not say Ben Tillman, moral character was shaped because of his race. And he was a racist. You can't say that. You cannot say that. And it was inherently determined, not because he was born that way, but because of the way he looked at his race. But the way he looked at his race, he now believed he was inherently superior to other people. There's no getting around that. In Georgia, you can't say that. So you can say that Ben Tillman did all these things, but you can't take the extra step and say the reason why he did that was because the way he viewed his race. That's why he did it. You can't take that extra step. That's ahistorical. That's just basically saying a guy did bad things. There's a reason why he did those bad things. He did those bad things because he believed he was better than Black people. To not be able to say that is morally wrong, quite frankly, and it's ahistorical. That's why he did it. He wasn't going around shooting white soldiers. He wasn't shooting any other soldiers. It was Black soldiers that he shot. And this was actually during 4th of July. They actually captured these soldiers and killed them and put them in what was called a dead ring. And basically what they did, the dead ring was basically any, meeny, miny, mo, and then they shot them. And the rest were able to escape. And so when the state senator came down to investigate, they met him at the train and murdered him. But I guess he just did that. Why? He don't like trains? I mean, so what you can do is you can say all these things, but you can't take it the direct next step under Georgia law. And so also, yet you can't espouse personal political beliefs. And in the law, it says that you basically can't persuade somebody when you're talking about these divisive concepts. So if something is determined to be a divisive concept, and then you try to persuade someone to see it in your way, that's going to be espousing your personal political belief. So this bill is everything that persons say that it is. It really is a restriction. It's not only a restriction on history, it's a restriction on modern day. You see how it's going to restrict teachers right now as they try to teach about what happened on Saturday. And here's the catch, and I think everybody will recognize this. You really need to call your school board people, because August 1st, 2022, they have to have in place a complaint process. So there's a complaint process that'll be on the next slide. There's a complaint process that students or parents have to go through to complain on their teachers. You really need to know what that process is going to be. In August 1st, 2022, your local school board has to put that complaint process in place. I would hope that every parent wants to know what that complaint process is going to be. To be honest, I would hope that school boards, I would hope the school boards would refuse to put up a complaint process. Make the state come down here and tell you why you have to do it. Teachers are teaching. They do it all the time. They've been doing it for all these years. Now, all of a sudden, the way they teach history is just wrong. The way they teach current events is just wrong. It's not all of a sudden. It's a backlash against African Americans is what it is. And we need to start talking like that and be honest about what it is. And that's exactly what happened on Saturday too. Next slide. So what this bill does not do, it doesn't give you a private right of action for damages. So you can't sue your teacher. So you can't sue the teacher for money or anything like that. But who can complain? Parents, students, school personnel. So a student can do the complaint if they're 18 or emancipated. But of course, a parent of a student can do the complaint. So the way it works is you submit the complaint to the principal. Now, your school system still has to put in place the complaint process. But what we did in the statute was basically kind of do an outline. So the outline is this. You submit the complaint to the principal. He or she has 5 days to investigate the complaint. They then have 10 days to meet with the complaining party and give a decision. So they meet with the parent or the student if they're 18. They meet with the parent or the student and say, this is what our decision is. We decided that it is the divisive concept that was taught or it's not. Within 3 days, if there's a request, then there must be written findings and remedial measures must be disclosed. So what happens is you get 5 days to investigate. After that, you got 10 days to meet with the complaining party and give your decision. If that complaining party or the party that the complaint was lodged against asks for a written finding, then you have 3 days to do that. So they say, look, whether they're satisfied or dissatisfied with the decision, they may say, I want a written finding. Then the principal or his designee has 3 days to give his written finding. The superintendent then can review the findings if requested. And that can be if requested by the teacher who's told on, or by the student's parent or the student, whoever may have done the telling. So the superintendent can review the record if requested. So the superintendent doesn't immediately jump in, but if it's requested, the superintendent will jump in. So you see why this complaint process is important. How is it going to work? So we don't like say, what's going to go into the review process. This is what your school board is going to be determining. And parents really need to be cognizant of how they're going to do this. Next slide. And so if reviewed, then the local board should review. So here's the deal. So the superintendent reviews it. So you have the complaint process. Principal meets with them. They say they want it in writing. Then they say, okay, we're going to basically appeal it to the superintendent. If it's reviewed by the superintendent, then his review is reviewed by the local school board. And that's a shell review. That's reviewed by the local school board. Then there's a right to appeal to the State Board of Education. So school board gets it. It could be, they may make a determination there was divisive concepts taught. They make a determination there wasn't divisive concepts taught. At that point in time, there's a right to appeal to the State Board of Education. And then the State Board of Education then, of course, makes the final plan if it gets that far. It doesn't have to get that far, but if it does, then they'll make a determination what action is merited. And they still have to kind of come up with all their particular actions. I guess at the end of the day, firing could possibly happen, or what may happen. So this is why that August 4th deadline is important, because the way these reviews are going to be done is going to be determined by the school board. And I know it won't happen, but I would really wish school boards would all stand together and say, we're not even going to put together a complaint process. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. It's racist, to be honest about it. And we're not even going to put together a complaint process and make the state come down here and force every school board to do that. Because this is a total backlash against Black people. That's what it is, because these divisive concepts don't apply to gender. They don't apply to religion. It only applies to race. And in Georgia, there really still is basically just really two races that go at it, and that's African Americans and whites. We do have a growing Hispanic population without a doubt, but really what we're gearing this towards is Blacks. Let's live in the real world here and understand who this is geared towards. Next slide. 441 allows the GBI to institute their own investigation on voter fraud. So the GBI, what happens right now is, and this is in general, the GBI has what you call original jurisdiction in certain things. But the GBI also can be called in to investigate things. And that's with any crime. So the GBI can be brought in to do fingerprints or investigate, like if Richmond County needs more expertise, so to speak. So they can bring the GBI in. The GBI can be brought in on voter fraud claims too. What this does is give them original jurisdiction. So now the GBI can have original jurisdiction. They don't have to be requested to come in. They have original jurisdiction to investigate, quote unquote, voter fraud. So that in itself, they could be brought in any event because they have jurisdiction if they're requested. And the State Elections Board could request them. The Secretary of State could request them. The issue with this bill is not necessarily that, which is problematic in itself. It's really the main issue is based on half-truths and lies. And this is one of the things I've been doing, is going around and talking about some of the type of complaints that are actually lodged. So the complaints that you've heard about, double voting, ballot harvesting, which there is no such thing, dead people voting, all that, those aren't really the complaints that go through the State Election Board. I encourage persons to go to the State Election Board. You can go to the State Election Board and you can read every complaint that's lodged. So what I've done is I've gone to like different dates where the State Election Board has hearings. And I didn't even pick and choose. I just took like the first 10. And this is an example. As far as my examples are concerned, I've read quite a few of them. But as far as the examples are concerned, and what you're going to notice about these examples I give you, and like I said, this is not picking and choosing. These are just the first ones that come up. Number one, a lot of these are going to be smaller counties. Some of these are going to be Republican counties. And then third, you're going to see that most of it's just human error and their mistakes or accidents and you're not going to find dead people voting and all that kind of foolishness that's in the news or the lies that are basically put out there. So when you're doing bills based on lies to try to hamper people from voting, then you understand what's going on. So this is why I kind of go through this. Troup County, this was a complaint, and this is something else to make note of. People will tell on you in a heartbeat. So this idea that you're going to have all these conspiracies, it's not true. They're not going to exist. People tell on people all day long. They see you do something wrong at the ballot or the poll or something, they will tell on you. And they will send it up to the state election board, and the state election board will investigate it. So this gives you an example too. And as I said, this is not picking and choosing. This is not going through 50 pages and say, oh, this is a good one, that's a bad one. I just took the first 10. And that's just for these examples, but I got a whole note. I can actually show it to you. This is my whole book on election fraud. That's just one of them. So, or whatever you want to call it. So the point being, Troup County board member attended a fundraiser. So this was an election board member that attended a fundraiser. He could do that. He's an election board member. He said he went to a fundraiser. He said, I didn't go as an election board member. I went as a private citizen. But somebody saw him at the fundraiser. They told on him. It was thrown out. Baldwin County, Georgia Schiff. I like Georgia Schiff. They said only their persons who have been registered were being ID'd for their registration. So that would be a problem. Most of the people they were registering would be African Americans. They reported that to the state election board. They said Baldwin County wouldn't ask for anybody else's ID. State election board went into it, and the hearings are verbatim. That's why it's kind of long. The hearings are verbatim. State election board looked into it, found out that was not accurate. But it's fine. They believed they were being treated inappropriately. Jefferson County, Black Voters Matter wanted to take seniors to the polls. So in this situation, this was a senior's home, and Black Voters Matter, as you know, has their bus. And so they had their bus, and they had seniors come onto the bus to look at the bus. When they got onto the bus, they said, hey, we can also go ahead and take you guys to go vote. And the head of the senior home came to the bus and said, you can't do that. They're in my custody. You can't just do that. In reality, I really know who you are. I can't let these people go with you. And if you have an elderly parent, and if you think you might have to put them in a home, you would not want a stranger taking your parent anywhere. And so that person was actually correct. They shouldn't have allowed those persons to go. So then the question still becomes, and the state election board, to their credit, still asked the question, well, how many seniors were there and how many of them actually voted? And I believe it was 57 seniors that were in the building, and 54 of them actually still went and voted. So this was not anything to stop them from voting. It was just, I can't let these seniors just get on a bus and just go willy-nilly wherever you're taking them. They're in my custody. Fulton County, there was a nasty voter that got reported. One of the poll workers said, hey, this voter was nasty to me. They reported him to the state election board. Fulton County, again, the guy wore a Make America Great hat. He wore it in a polling place. Somebody told on him. So they investigated that. The key to that one was that he said it didn't have Trump on there. Of course, we know it was a Trump hat, but he says it didn't have Trump on there, but you can't wear political paraphernalia in there. But the state election board basically did what they call just a write-up to him, and just a written instruction to him, and said, don't wear that kind of stuff in there. Next slide. Fayette County was a wrong drop box. Fayette County, which is a heavily Republican county, they had a wrong type of drop box. They got told on. Their drop box wasn't waterproof. They got told on. Fulton County, the keys to the drop box was left in the drop box. Now that's what was alleged, but no one knows that that was actually true or false, because the person who said that they found the keys in the drop box, they said they took the keys to the local sheriff's department or police department. That local police department said, we never received any keys. We don't know what they're talking about. But that was the allegation. So whether that's accurate or not, they really couldn't make that determination. But the bottom line is, as you see, these are just human error kind of situations or mistakes. You don't see anything about dead people voting. You don't see anything about the stuff that the Republicans have put out there. Stewart County, 18 electors were placed in a wrong precinct. They had just had redistricting like we just did, and they had actually went to the courts. And so it got kind of confusing. These electors were placed in the wrong precincts. Before election day, it was cleared up. But somebody told on them, that's fine. And, said, hey, these 18 electors were placed in the wrong area. So the point being, and if you read all of them and you can go through them, and as I say, it's there. That's the problem with all these bills. is these election bills. Secretary of State knows everything he's saying is not true. If he's talking about fraud and all that, he knows it's not true because he knows the type of complaints that are lodged. He knows the type of complaints that are lodged. He knows that people will tell on you in a heartbeat. He knows there ain't no way you're gonna have all these grand conspiracies with all this stuff. You know, people voting for people paying for people to vote and all this kind of stuff. When people are telling on people about wearing a hat, you're not gonna be doing all this other stuff. And he knows all of that. He knows the complaints are there. And here's the catch. He knows you can go read the complaints. And he still acts like there's all this election fraud and still pushes these kind of bills. So they really are just taking us for fools when they do this kind of stuff, because I guess they assume we won't go read it, but we will. And hopefully the result of that will be that we continue to vote in high numbers. And let me make note of this too. It's good that we're voting in high numbers. Just because you beat somebody who wants to cheat you don't mean they're not trying to cheat you. So make no mistake, these guys are still trying to cheat us. It's fine if we're able to beat them. It's fine if we're able to still get through these hurdles. That's nothing unusual for African Americans. We always get through hurdles when it comes to voting, but we shouldn't have to go through the hurdles. So forget about saying, oh, well, it's okay because we got high turnout. Forget that. None of this stuff should be in place. That's the key. And when you allow stuff like this to get in place and other stuff to get in place, that's where you have all these different problems. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. SB 319, this is a big one. No longer need a permit to carry a firearm. You currently can carry now in your car, home, place of business, home, of course, but also your place of business without a permit. So a lot of places that you would need it. And all we're talking about here is no permit. We're not talking about not being able to carry a firearm. I would dare say probably a lot of people on this call have a firearm. We're not talking about that. We're talking about just going to this place to get a permit. What's the rationale for doing that? Number one is to make sure that you're not getting involuntarily committed. That's one of the reasons you have to go get a permit, to make sure a person hasn't been involuntarily committed. And if they have been involuntarily committed, to make sure that they're now fine. Nothing wrong with that, but that doesn't no longer exist. The other one is to make sure you're not convicted of a felony. Now, maybe if you had a felony that didn't involve a victim, possibly that could be changed. But if you're talking about a person who's a violent felon, they shouldn't be walking around with a gun. They still can't have a gun, but now they don't have to. Now you can't even get them on not having the permit because the permit doesn't exist. Current law. So check this out. So current law, well, it's not current anymore because the governor signed this. But before we signed this and before we passed this, current law was it shall be unlawful for any person to possess in any park that's supposed to be park, in any park or recreation area without any handgun without a permit. Okay, so in any park or recreation area, any handgun without a permit, there's no necessity for a permit anymore. So that reason why I put that in there is that's what the law was. So that language without a permit, scratch that out because there is no need for a permit anymore. Permits don't exist anymore. So now you can possess in a park, recreation area, whatever, no permit. So that just gives one example there. Now, private property can still eject persons they don't want the weapon. So if you go to a restaurant, your favorite restaurant don't want people in there with weapons, they can still eject they can still have that sign up and say, hey, we don't want you in here with a gun. So that still can exist. Now, if you think about it, a lot of times you've seen people with weapons in Walmart, and it's usually not people. It might be like one guy you see in a Walmart somewhere, and he has it on his hip. You kind of assume he must have a permit because it's out there like that. You kind of assume he must have a permit. So the store lets that person go in. I remember growing up, there was always an elderly African-American gentleman in our Kroger who always had his gun on his hip. So you kind of assume, I guess this guy has a permit or whatnot. Now, you can have persons freely do that. Walmart's going to have to now start saying nobody can walk in, which may be not necessarily a bad thing, but here's the point. You've always allowed that one guy to do it. Now, when other persons come in to do it, it's going to cause a commotion. It's going to cause a problem. Police are going to get called. Somebody's going to get killed over this. Because, see, they would never have done it if you didn't repeal this law. Not saying that person's necessarily the greatest person on earth, but you don't repeal this law, nobody tries to go in there without a permit with a gun on their hip. You repeal it. Now, all of a sudden, who you think might do that, unfortunately, might be young African-American kids. They go in. Legally, they can do it. If they're not a felon, legally, they can do it unless Walmart says get out. But now, if an officer says, I bet that guy got a felony record, and he goes and asks him for a permit, it doesn't have to even be in Walmart, wherever it may be. That guy can say, you can't ask me for a permit. You can't ask me anything. Somebody's going to get hurt over this. But you know what? That kid would have never done it because he's still a kid. So he's just doing it, not because he's trying to hurt anybody. He's just doing it because he's a kid. And now all of a sudden he knows, hey, we can walk around with pistols on our hip. Let's do it. We don't need no permit. But somebody's going to be like, hey, I need to see y'all's license. Can't do that. Legally, you can't do it. But you know somebody's going to do it. You know some officer going to do that because he's going to be trying to check and see if he's got a felony on his record or something. Because you know, when you put him in the computer, you'll know. Now, the law says you can't do that. But it's going to happen. And somebody's going to get hurt over it. But it never would have happened when we set the repeal of this. And the bottom line is it's been very easy just to say, just go get a permit. It's not that big of a deal. And all of this could be avoided. Still can't carry in a courthouse, government building, jail, or prison, place of worship, and within 100 feet of a polling place. So that still is the law. Courthouse, government building, jail, prison, place of worship. You still can't carry in there unless place of worship wants you to carry in there. But other than that, you still can't do that. Next slide. So I just did a couple of pieces of local legislation. I had SB 227, which was the mall bill, and that dealt with basically using eminent domain. This would apply to any mall in Georgia. Basically, it would allow the government to use eminent domain to declare that mall a nuisance, so to speak. They're hard to declare nuisances now. You have the law in place that you can do it, but the problem is when you start talking about it being a nuisance under the law, it means it needs to be like in a heavily crime area. It needs to be dilapidated. And what's taking place is a lot of times you fix these places up. So a lot of the, they went, if you remember correctly, a few years ago, reading some mall folks, they went in and cleaned all that out and gutted it. So you don't have some of the issues you had before. So it's harder now to declare these type of malls to be nuisances, but they still have an impact on the community. So what this bill did was it said, if you've been vacant for at least 20 consecutive years, then you can be declared to be a nuisance because of your vacancy and the impact that you have on the community. It passed the Senate, but did not get through the House. So I'm gonna try to do this again next year. We did get it through the Senate, but the House stalled it. SB 537 deals with food deserts. It was going to create a committee, basically an oversight committee to deal with the issue of food insecurity. That also passed the Senate, but got tied up in the House because there was a bill, and Representative Nelson can even speak to this, anyone else is on, was called the Right to Farm bill. But basically it's not a right to farm bill. Basically it was a bill that says that farmers can have all these gigantic farms that are out there. You have a time limit, like if they've got very noxious odors and things of that nature, it's very hard to sue them is what it did, to put it in kind of a nutshell. So if you're out there and buy a chicken plant or a chicken farm or something like that, and it's got all these noxious odors and making you sick, this right to farm bill is going to make it more difficult to sue under those circumstances. So I was opposed to that. So even though it passed the Senate 56-0, when it went to the House, it got held up because they were in love with this right to farm bill and didn't like the way I was going to vote. Now that's not like my conjecture. When I went to the House committee, they asked me how I was going to vote on the right to farm bill. On television, they said, what do you plan on doing on the right to farm bill? Well, I was honest, and I'm not voting for it. And so they killed SB 537. So they addressed the food deserts, but we were able to get $25,000 in the budget as seed money for a database to talk about where food insecurity is in Georgia. That did make it into the budget, and that's going to go through the Department of Agriculture to where they can talk about what they're going to do is create a database. So they got that $25,000 to basically outsource to groups, and there's different groups working with the Department of Agriculture to get that done. I don't know anything about websites and things of that nature, but the seed money is there so they can outsource that to somebody who can help develop the website. And now we'll at least start knowing where food insecurity is in Georgia and how to kind of try to, and best practices to kind of deal with it. It'll all be on that database. So that was a small victory, but I still want to get that oversight committee to try to get that through next year. So those are two things that I was working on this year. So now, even before opening up the questions, I know we got Representative Prince and Representative Nelson on. Let them also add their piece to this.
And you have Representative Howard, he's on as well. I will allow him.
Okay, I didn't see his name.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, he's on the other side because he's on the phone.
All righty.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, Thank you, Senator Jones, for that update. I just want to add a little bit more information. There was a lot of legislation that came through, some good, some bad, some that was a work in progress. Um, a concern of mine was a transgender sports bill, and the Georgia High School Association actually just took a vote on that just a few weeks ago. What it is, the young lady or the young man that is playing sports in Georgia high schools or middle schools, they must play and register according to what information is on their birth certificate. And there were parents and some groups and organizations that did oppose that. They felt like the young lady, the young man should be able to play on any team. And they made it very clear it is a law. Whatever you are registered as on your birth certificate, that is how you will be able to play sports. We talk about the election bill. Just give you a little bit of information. Last November, there was election in Burke County down in Sardis, Georgia. I got a few phone calls about it. I actually rode down there to see what was going on. Sardis, Georgia, small town, about 50 miles from here, does not have the voting machine. They're still issuing paper ballots, which was a concern of mine. I sit outside and watch the people vote, go in and out. After about an hour, I decided to go in. It was actually in City Hall, very little small room. I might have saw maybe 6 people vote the hour I was down there. I walked in, I asked them what was the voting machine. They said, we don't have voting machines. They said, would you like a paper ballot? Now, I don't even live in Burke County. They didn't ask me nothing else. I asked them what's their process. And another legislator had been informed. She had went the day before, Representative Frazier. That's actually her district. So I went down there one day. She went down there one day. And it was just very interesting. So we got fair fight involved because the Georgia Secretary of State, they just really don't see anything wrong with that. You're letting certain counties continue to use paper ballots. And what the lady that was over the Board of Elections told me, she said, well, we lock them in a box at night. Really? It was not required of them to purchase the voting machines. So to me, it will make it very difficult for some candidates. Thank goodness they did have a mayor that won his, he beat the incumbent last year, but that could have went the opposite way because you have no way of knowing. They wasn't keeping any paperwork, any totals or anything until Representative Frazier paid them a visit. They can't tell you from one day to the next how many people voted. So that is a concern of mine. How many other counties or small municipalities is that going on that we are just turning our head to? Because to me, even your local or your statewide races could be determined in 6 or 7 small towns. So that was very interesting to me. And hopefully this year I'm going to get a chance to go back down there again. But their concern was we can't afford the machines. I'm like, wow, okay then. Another concern of mine, and I understand the people that wanted was to help our veterans, and we do appreciate our veterans and thank them for their service. But what I don't want us to get caught up in is we start saving a lot of money. That money has to come from some other department. So there was a lot of concern this year about lowering or removing some of the taxes for veterans. We don't want all the veterans to run to Georgia all of a sudden, and then we have to cut services from other departments or other agencies, or we can't compete with other states. So that is a concern of mine, but we continue to try to do things because Georgia is home to thousands of veterans, especially within the CSRA. And we try to work with them, work with their families, because they have paid the price and served our country very well. A little bit different subject I'd like to talk about is the voting that's going on now. We are in early voting now. Friday is the last day for early voting in Richmond County. And then, of course, the election is next Tuesday, May 24th. I would like to advise everyone, please talk to people. Make sure they are voting the entire ballot. Don't just start at the top of the ballot and vote for 2 or 3 things and then that's it. You really need to vote for everything on the ballot, including the question. And then what concerns me, after you vote and print your paper out, you must scan those papers in. I've already received phone calls from people that brought their papers back home with them, and their vote didn't count, and they were frustrated. I say, but it tells you on the screen, because I went to Diamond Lake last Saturday to vote. It tells you on the screen when you print it out that you now need to go scan your ballot. So we need to just make sure we educate and inform our people. When you vote the whole ballot and you print it out, you have not completed your voting process. You really need to go by that scanner on your way out the door. We've never been used to bringing nothing out the door with us as far as a piece of paper. So I want to make sure we try to get that word out. Quite a few of our local residents are finding out their county districts have changed, their state districts have changed. So state numbers have changed. So we must educate our people. I would advise them to go to check myvoterpage.gov for Georgia and check. So you will know your precinct. You will know that you're no longer in County District 2, you're now in 1, or whatever the state district may be. Because you don't want to wait on election day, May 24th at 5:30, 5:40, close to 6:30, and then you can't vote that day. So it's so critical right now that we inform people, check before you leave, check before you go vote, but make sure you know where your precinct is. We did talk about some legislation for a couple of years. We're trying to get it, and of course, I'm going to talk about that in just a second, where you can vote anywhere in your county. You know, nobody wants to hear that, because sometimes people may be on one side of town being a caregiver for their family members, and they live on another side of town and can't get back to their precinct. We don't want to make it hard for people to be able to vote. We just want to be consistent. And there are some states that are doing that. So I think it's something we need to look into in Georgia. As people go to school, work out of town with today's technology, let's make sure we educate and make it easy for people to vote and not be a distraction or discourage them to not vote. While we're talking about voting, every election we need registered voters voting. Some kind of way, and I don't know where and how and where we're going to straighten this out. We just need to inform people every vote count, every vote matters. Because so many issues are affecting our families, our communities, day in and day out. We vote for the people that we think will represent us, make our decision. But as a legislator, it's only so much we can do. But as a voter, there is power in your vote. And I want to thank Mr. Ellis Albright for having this event and allowing the members of the delegation that are present to come on board and to talk about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Clark. Brian, I'm gonna go to Representative Prince, and then I'm allow Representative Howard to say some words as well.
All right. Hey, good evening, and thank you guys again. Thank you, Ellis, and the Small Business League to putting this on. We appreciate that. A couple of things that I was worked this past session. Of course, most of you know I did a resolution last year for a state cemetery in the Augusta area. Helped procure over $1 million to start that process. We didn't do anything with it last year, so we had to basically make sure it was still in the budget for this year, and it is in the budget. So the state has put up this $1 million for a possible state cemetery in the Augusta area. Now we're just waiting on the federal guys to come on board and get the rest of it going. A couple of things that were important, other things that were important. We had a House Bill 1064, and that dealt with the retired military pay. As of now, currently, if you're 65 or older, you exempt, I think it's about $65,000, $65,000, you're already exempt. But what this new bill did was folks like myself who were less than 62, we get a $17,500 exemption piece. And that's if that doesn't count any rental property or any other income that you have coming in. Then there's also the second part of the bill, if you're 62 or under, if you have an earned income of $17,500, you can still get that $17,500 for your income tax. So understand that South Carolina, Alabama, all the states that are around us have some type of military retiree, for lack of better words, discount or tax exempt. And Georgia has finally come on board, and we're doing something for that in order to keep retirees in the area. So we'll see how that goes. Again, of course, being a retiree, I could not vote on that bill. I had to take the Rule 33 because I'm definitely affected by it. So definitely bowed out on that, but I did support it and some of the work they did behind the scenes. Also, for many of you may know, I also own a driver's education school. So there was one bill that was out there that didn't get through, but what it did, it extended Joshua's Law. For those who don't know what that is, that's basically a law where 15 to 18-year-olds have to have a certain so many hours in the classroom and so many hours behind the wheel before they can test for their driver's license. What this has done, the Georgia Office of Highway Safety, they offer scholarships to pay for children, kids to actually go to the course and, well, to attend the course. What we tried to do this year was try to extend that, not just from, well, to add those children who are basically phasing out of foster care. I think they phase out at 18 years old, but we wanted to include, basically run that up to 20 years old for those types of children. That way, giving them an opportunity. Once they came out of foster care, they still could come back, take the class, and actually get their license. Because we do find, I mean, just being in the business, I find there's a lot of folks out there that are in that foster care system who just haven't had time or had people to train them to get a license. So, but that bill did not make it out. It got in the Senate and it sort of stalled there in the committee. So that's something that hopefully we'll work on next year. But the last thing I want to talk about, and I think Senator Jones talked a little bit about was the mental health piece that was a big focus for us this past session. House Bill 1013, the Mental Health Parity Act. And basically what that does, it puts mental health on the same level as any type of physical injury that you may have when you go to the doctor. So it's going to require insurance companies to basically treat a mental health or mental illness as you would a broken leg or broken arm or things like that. That passed with a lot of bipartisan support. And that's something that the state, and not just the state, I hear a lot of churches. I know my church, Tabernacle, we're doing a big mental health seminar this weekend on Saturday. So it's a big push for that. And this bill was sort of timely. And again, more to follow on as we, and I think Senator Jones talked about how the police officers can now request mental health folks to come to the scene with them to maybe de-escalate some of the incidents that we're having. That way gunfire and, just a lot of crazy stuff doesn't get too crazy. But I'll yield the rest of my time. And thanks again. I'm in the middle of an election. I'm in a primary. So I've been outside working and waving signs and things like that. But didn't want to call it robbery for not to come in and just spend a little time here. And thanks again, Mr. Albright, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Representative Prince. And was there a bill number for the retiree bill?
Yes, I'm sorry. I should have given that. That's 1064.
1064.
1064. Yeah, 1064. And well, speaking of that, because got to make sure I know my audience here, because small business folks. There was another bill out there, House Bill 389, and that's what is called a misclassification bill. A lot of the laborers are really were big on that. I had a good friend out of Gwinnett County, Dewey McClain, Representative Dewey McClain. He's been talking about this for the last 9 years because we came in together, but it actually got passed out this year. And basically what that does is doesn't allow employers to just misclassify an employee, basically so they don't have to pay them their health benefits and things like that. So that was a big, big win for the labor folks and for all of us really, because a lot of immigrants, a lot of other folks are coming here who they're not getting, they're working the hours, they're getting the paychecks, but when it comes to benefits and things like that, they're classified different. That way the employees doesn't have to pay but so much. So that's another one that you may want to look out for in your area. Over.
Thank you, sir. And best of luck to you and your campaign as well. And thank you for taking time out of your day to come by and visit with us.
Sure.
Representative Howard, you are now unmuted and you can talk. Representative Howard. When he decides to talk, we will allow him to talk. Do we have any questions? If you have any questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand, and I will ensure that they'll get answered. The first question I want to know is, why is there such a push to not have a permit or require anything for weapons when voting is also a constitutional right as well, and there's such a big push? Is there, can anybody just expound on, I know what the reason is, but just so that others can hear, why is there a big push for people to have weapons but without a permit, but you still got to register to vote?
I'll take a quick swag of that. I know Harold's on the legal side, but and you're laughing, Mr. Albright, maybe the same thing I'm thinking, but it's an election year, guys. They're going to pull out everything they can to raw up the base, for lack of better words. It makes the bill itself, I mean, if you read it and you try to articulate it, it makes no sense at all. It goes against everything that people with a half a mind say they would agree on, that, you need to be, and being prior military, I mean, you didn't operate a weapon unless you had training on it, you had a license and things like that. Now we're saying not only, do you don't need all that, but you can carry it anywhere you want. And then it's a scare tactic. And as you can see with some of the, and I don't want to relate it to the shootings that are going on now, but a lot of folks use it now as a scare tactic. They're carrying a weapon. It's back, when you were growing up, somebody had a weapon, they were bad. Back then it was a dog. You had a dog, a big dog that would bite, everybody was afraid of it because you put your dog on them. Now it's a weapon. So that's my swag at it.
Representative Senator Jones.
I would say the same thing. It's election year purposes, but basically the same exact thing. There's no doubt about it. But it's a smart move on their part. And one of the things that they've been doing, which I understand, is they've created silos for their voters. And they have some voters who only care about guns. And so they did that bill for them. They have some voters who are obsessed with election fraud. So they did the GBI thing for them. So, they kind of didn't go all the way with the transgender issue, but then the Georgia High School Association basically took off where they could have legislated. So what Governor Kemp is doing is he's looking at different silos to fit different aspects of his voters. And so he's like, if you're obsessed with guns, I got you covered. If you're obsessed with stopping Black people from voting, I got you covered. If you're obsessed with people who you don't want Black people to be taught in schools anymore, I got you covered. So that's what he did. And we ought to recognize that's exactly what was going on. And it's election year ploy, but it also has, real world consequences too.
Representative Nelson, would you like to take a shot at that?
No, I think my colleagues have done a good job of answering that.
Okay, let me see if we have any other questions. Another thing that and there is a redistricting battle. I know one day I was listening and I saw Senator Jones and Max Burns going at it regarding that. Would one of y'all like to say something in regards to that in the redistricting that occurred here in Augusta, Richmond County?
Yeah, I will. I mean, okay, so yeah, I mean, in all the major African-American counties, their local maps were changed. And so Augusta was similar to that. So whether it was Fulton, Chatham, et cetera, on some level, their local maps were changed. Gwinnett County, any minority-driven county, any majority minority county of any size and consequence, their election maps were changed. The things that they actually voted on got changed. And so what's going on right now is still trying to find persons that actually bring the lawsuit. You have 2 years to do it. So the deal is most of the groups that bring these lawsuits, they we're concentrating on the federal. So right now they're filing all their federal material, and then they're going to come back for local legislation. So whether it's Augusta, whether it's Fulton County, whether it's Gwinnett, we're all kind of like in a waiting line for them to finish filing all their federal materials first for Congress, and then they'll come back and start dealing with the local material. So they were kind of like taken surprise too that they had this much local issue that took place. They had never seen it before. And you can go back and see the last times we've done redistricting, you've not seen maps be changed at this level. So every majority minority county of any consequence, their map got changed. And then like Athens, they don't even have Democratic representation. So they never even had a map. You know, the map that was going to be, the Republicans drew that map to begin with. I think that was the only other kind of like majority minority county that kind of fit that too. But they don't have Democratic representation because their stuff is so gerrymandered that they should have Democratic representation because they're not election board, their county council is actually majority Democratic county council, but they have no Democratic representation as far as the state's concerned in the Senate. So Republican senators drew their map. So everybody basically had Republicans either mess with their maps or just draw it on their own. And Augusta kind of fit into that model too, unfortunately. But still going to be filing a lawsuit against it. The reason why it hasn't happened as soon as we'd like it to be is because the federal is going to come first, just like anything else. Federal always trumps local. And so in this situation, they're looking at federal first.
Yeah, and I would like to add there, Harold, and I just want to make sure everybody understands. And Harold, Senator Jones, please correct me if I'm off here. But you know, what a lot of folks don't realize is that we as state legislators, it is our job to draw the maps. That's from congressional to state to local. That's our job. It's in our job description. That's what we do. Okay. We as a local delegation, Chairman Howard and the rest, we basically allow our school board and our county commissioners to give us input and to have these ad hoc committees to do that. Okay, which is, I think, is the right way because it affects, I mean, we want to keep things at the lowest level. The people who are right there, it makes sense. But technically, I just want to make that we at the state legislators, we are the ones who do that. And so, as Senator Jones said, some local board of educations, county commissioners, whatever you want, whatever they had, didn't even have that opportunity. Their state legislators drew the maps and boom, that was it. So I wanted to say that because a lot of folks think is, county commissioners drawing maps to draw people out and things like that. At the end of the day, it has to come to us and we have to agree on. And we all, at least the Democratic legislators, we all agreed on the maps that the county commissioners, where the ad hoc committee and where the commissioners and the Board of Education approved that they wanted. But again, at the end of the day, it has to go through the state legislator. And right now, as you all know, the Republicans have the House and the Senate and the executive suite. So that's how we ended up to where we are now. But as Senator Jones said, more to follow on lawsuits. But I just wanted to make sure it's clear that as state legislators, that is part of our responsibility to do that. And at the end of the day, that's what it lays on. Over.
There is a question in the chat that was there a bill introduced to address the former president and a U.S. senator trying to influence the Secretary of State? If not, why?
I did not see one on the House side. I'm not sure about on the Senate. Anything was referenced that.
There wasn't one. I'm not really sure what the bill would be. If you're talking about the crime that potentially was committed, you have the district attorney in Fulton County that's investigating that actively now with the grand jury. So that wouldn't be a bill that you would do. That would be, she's investigating that now with the grand jury. So that would be, that's where that lies right now.
So listening to both of you talk about the maps, there is a distinct possibility that in the future they may be changed following these lawsuits.
I think there's a possibility, but as of 10 years ago, when I think that there were also lawsuits there, that didn't sort of work out. But again, I'm not saying they don't, they won't, but it's in the process, and basically it's sort of, well, it is out of our hands right now.
Yeah, so let's kind of put it in perspective. So when we did it 10 years ago, we couldn't come up with an agreement, so it went to the court, and the court just redrew it. And as far as lawsuits are concerned, yeah, I think they'll get redrawn because they violate the Voting Rights Act, quite frankly. So I believe they'll be redrawn. It's just a matter of getting into the queue, so to speak, to get it into the court system. But they violate the Voting Rights Act. So here's the other point that's a lot different that is on our side. And that's that we actually have a Justice Department that's in Democratic hands. Now, it doesn't have to go through pre-clearance, obviously, but it does mean that the Justice Department, and I can tell you this from firsthand experience, because I just did a declaration, because I may be called as a witness in a case. So from firsthand experience, the Justice Department is working on these federal cases too, which would be different. So normally you would just have like the NAACP, nothing wrong with that, but you might have just those folks, ACLU or somebody like that, working on these federal cases. Here, the Justice Department is actually actively working on these cases too. So you have it's not little, it's huge. That's a huge advantage you have, to where you may have the government themselves, the federal government, actually step in and file a lawsuit itself. So hopefully that will take place. But as stated, because you have these midterms coming up, and that's just going to take precedent, they're trying to see if they can get some of these lawsuits filed and possibly change some of these lines, because you have the midterms coming up. And because everything was so late, because of COVID and the census was so late, it's going to be hard for anybody to win those congressional maps, but that's a whole nother lawsuit. But that's what's going on right now, is you really don't, if you can avoid it, if possible. Now, of course, we're going to have ours, but some people have their elections a little bit later than Georgia does. They're all in November, but I'm talking about the primary elections. It's a possibility, those states, they're trying to possibly get theirs changed before the midterms actually take place in November. Because obviously, if the midterms take place in November, the way some of these maps are drawn, you're talking about Republicans possibly taking over Congress, which would be a tremendous disadvantage to everybody.
So as we close up, I've been trying to allow Representative Howard to say a few words, but
I was going to ask, did you want to try him again? I don't know.
I just did ask him to unmute, and he did text me, but I'm not sure what's going on with him being on the phone. So as before we say anything closing, let me first allow Ms. Howard to say something on behalf of our board of directors, and then I'll allow each of you to end up this conversation. Ms. Howard.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Well, I would just like to, first of all, thank each of the participants, legislators, for just being with us this evening to give us some update on the bills that, some of the main bills, rather, that was introduced and passed. A lot of discussion about the different ones. The mental health bill is one of the things that I am really happy about that was passed. And there are several others that Senator Jones brought to our attention, as well as Representative Nelson. You all have done a tremendous job in updating and bringing some good information to us. And as you said, there was some bad, but for the most part, it's always good to get some good information breakdown of things that are really going on. Other than that, I just once again would like to thank each of you for your time spent with us this evening. And it has truly been a tremendous help to us.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Okay, So I'm gonna ask Representative Howard to see if he's gonna say anything again. If not, we have our final statements from you, Senator Jones, and Representative Clark, and then Representative Prince before we close out.
I would just say to please make sure everybody goes vote May 24th, and even more importantly in November. We want to make sure that people go out and vote and exercise their right to vote, because it's extremely important. As you can see with these laws, whether it's the good stuff or the bad stuff, laws are made. I mean, it happens. When a person says, "Oh, what do you guys do?" Whether it's the county commission, whether it's state legislature, whether it's Congress, as you see, laws are made. They're made, some good, some bad, and they do have impacts on people's lives. So voting does matter, without a doubt. So please go vote for May, but also make sure you go vote for November too.
And take someone with you.
There you go.
Amen. Once again, I want to thank you all for having this, the CSRA Business League. And I encourage all of our citizens, all of our voters, all of our constituents to get engaged in your community one way or the other. Attend these meetings that organizations put on. Go out and do your due diligence so you'll know what's going on and not have a gotcha moment. And the next thing you'll know, you can be involved in your community. What happened, what doesn't happen. You can be a part of something positive and not continue to sit on the sideline. And I always commend those candidates offer themselves for public office. It is a tremendous thing to do back and give back in your community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Representative Prince.
Okay, I'm talking to myself. I'm sorry. I could take me off mute. Again, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I encourage you, as the league, that you guys get with us, especially if it's something that you guys see that we need, that the state needs to address, or something that, whether it's good or bad. But get with the delegation. That's what we're here for. But I ask that you get with us as soon as possible before we go up. Don't wait till January. Please don't wait till January. Everybody's trying to get to us in January. That's when we're bobbing and weaving and things like that. But if there's some things that you think we should be addressing, or you have concerns about that have helped make things better, I don't know your field. I don't know what you do every day, but you do. And you know how the state affects it. And if we can be of any help to you, please get that information to us. I don't know if it's drafting legislation, it's changing policy, or whatever it is, but that's what we're here for. That's what we do. We have to carry the water for you guys. I mean, if we're elected to those positions, that's what we're there for. So again, thanks for having us. But again, continue to share good information with us, and help us when there are bills that come up that we don't understand, but it affects you. We've asked you to be the resident expert on those. Give us some feedback, and so give us some reach back. And now the Capitol is open again. We're not letting folks in the actual chamber. However, we are having groups come up again. So you guys, feel pretty good about COVID and everything else. You can wear your mask, whatever, but the Capitol is open again. So please come up and visit. Let us know when you're coming. We'd love to see you, entertain you for a minute, take pictures or whatever, but also just get you in to talk to the people who can help you if there's certain areas that you have. And as you said, let's go out and vote, and you can vote Prince. Okay, if you're in House District 132, Brian Prince. I am your state rep. Thanks, man. Be good. Yeah.
Thank you, Representative Prince. And to piggyback on that, I try to stay in contact with you all as much as possible. I know me and Senator Jones, we talk a lot, as well as Representative Howard. So I do try to maintain those open lines of communication to ensure that if something comes up, that we let you know, or let our clients know as well. So let me thank y'all again. This has been a great session. We streamed it live on our Facebook page, and it's also on our YouTube page. So if you would like to go back and view this again, you can. You will receive a follow-up thank you email on tomorrow with the links to it as well. So if you can't find it tonight, don't feel bad. We will make sure that you have it tomorrow in our follow-up email. There will be a survey that pops up after this. Please fill out the survey. This will help us regarding future workshop, but also would give the legislators some feedback regarding their presentations as well, and some things that they can do to help you as well. So next year, moving forward, taking your advice, Representative Prince, we're going to try to schedule, instead of waiting to the end of December to schedule your trip back, we're going to try to schedule that session sometime in November or early December. So we'll take you up on that offer. Well, thank you, everybody. And I thank each of you again. Please make sure that you fill out our survey. And again, on behalf of our board of directors and staff and Ms. Howard, who's on the call, thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule. The CSRA Business League will be celebrating our 52nd anniversary in November. Please be on the lookout for that information, as well as we will begin having our women's conference again. So I would disseminate that information as well. But again, thank you, Senator Jones, Representative Clark, and Representative Prince for a great session. And
Hey, when's the men's conference? I'm just checking, buddy. Okay.
Why you put me on the spot like that?
That's what I thought. Time to go. Bye.
Well, thank y'all, and everybody have a great night. Thank y'all again.